All right, so in this video, I want to walk you through what I'm looking at when I look at a bathroom to renovate for a client. And I want to go over a bunch of items that you want to pay attention to because it's going to increase the amount of labor that it takes and possibly the more money that it might cost to renovate. So I'm going to show you a bunch of things. So come on in and check it out. Okay, so we're in this existing bathroom. This isn't a very large bathroom. It's basically 5 by 8. And as you can see, the way that the layout is, it has the tub on the left-hand side here and basically very little room here with a pedestal sink. Very typical type of size bathroom. But the first thing that I want you to pay attention to is that these walls bump out of the plaster area. So when I see this, I know that there's going to be a lot of effort and a lot of work to demo this. I'll show you exactly why, but this is the old style mud bed walls that contractors used to build for tile, and it's a real challenge to remove. The other thing that I've noticed is that we have plaster walls. This is not drywall. So this is going to take a lot more effort to remove this existing plaster. So we'll show you what you might encounter when you get into doing that as well. Okay, so the third thing I noticed right off the bat is the old tile floor. So this pinwheel mosaic floor, very flat. So I didn't notice any cracking. That's one thing you want to pay attention to. If you have a lot of big stress cracks, you have to be aware that there might be something structural wrong. But just knowing that this is this older home with the mud bed walls, you can rest assured that the floor is going to be about 2 inches thick of mud as well. Now there's two different ways that they used to go about doing this. So number one, which I'm hoping this is it, is that they used to use 1x material and then put metal lath and then the mud bed on top of that. That usually is the easier type to remove. But if they didn't do that, they would actually notch out the top of the joists and put blocking in between the joist and fill that all with mud. And that would end up being close to 4 inches thick and a lot more effort to remove. So this is a big item that when you're replacing this, it can get into a lot more labor. And so you want to evaluate that before you get started into something like this. Okay, so I just want to mention that on a floor like this mud bed floor, there is absolutely no reason that you can't go over top of this with new tile. So if you don't want to get into demoing this mud bed floor, there's no reason you can't go with the tile over. As long as there isn't any major stress cracks anywhere that they're showing that something has separated or there was structural problems, this is a very sound, good floor to go over. There's just a couple of products I would recommend going over top of this if you are going to tile, and that would be Aqua or Mapei Eco Primer or Ardex 8+9. It's basically going to create an isolation membrane and allow your thin set to bond really well to this floor. So keep that in mind. If you don't want to get into additional work, there's no reason you can't leave this existing floor. And another thing when it comes to the floor, you want to pay attention to the levelness. So just kind of evaluate that right off the bat because there's a lot of indications when it comes to that can cause a lot more work. So if you're extremely out of level, you could be potentially having some structural issues with the bathroom. A lot of these older bathrooms, especially if 50, 60 years old, most likely was renovated at one point or another. It had some kind of plumbing repair. So you don't really know what other contractors have done to the structure underneath the bathroom. I've seen it a lot of times where they've actually just notched out the joist to get the plumbing where they needed it to go, and it ended up creating a sinking area in the bathroom floor. So if you have excessive unlevelness, you want to be aware that there might be a lot more work there, and you want to pad your bid a little bit to be able to account for that. But really anything in these older homes, anything within a 1/4 inch is not really anything to be concerned about. I would be more concerned about something that's going to be an inch out of level in this smaller bathroom. So just evaluate that, and you want to evaluate any stress cracks. If you have any big cracks in this mortar bed, that kind of indicates some kind of settling, some kind of structural issue as well. Okay, so then when you're thinking about removing all of this plaster in these older homes, you got to pretty much account for probably not having any insulation in your outside walls. They didn't used to do that 50 years ago. So most likely you're going to have to insulate, or you're going to want to insulate. And then a lot of times people would do blown in insulation in their above attic space. You could probably evaluate that if you had access to get there, but I would just plan on putting insulation in your outside wall and having all new insulation up here. But just know that when you remove the ceiling, that if it's blown in insulation, it's definitely going to be a messy, dusty situation. But you know, really, you kind of have to evaluate or plan on putting new insulation in a bathroom that's this old. Okay, so evaluating the plumbing, or mainly your water supplies and your actual drain lines. This can be tricky depending on whether the basement is finished, and you might have limited access to be able to tell that. But you can tell a lot from looking into your vanity or your toilet supply and be able to gauge whether it's copper or galvanized. So you want to open this up, just take a look and see what you have. And in this particular situation, it looks like we have brass 3/8 inch stub outs. So most likely that goes into a brass fitting. And then we can always check out to see whether there's copper in other existing places. Now you can see that my drain has a Fernco on it. That usually means that there was an issue connecting at some point. So you might as well rest assured when you tear out all of this, you're probably going to have to put a new adapter on for your P-trap. Another good indicator to see what kind of water supply it is, take a look at your valve on your toilet. You can see that this is a very old valve, but it also has a 3/8 inch chrome stub outs, and it most likely goes into a brass fitting that connects to copper. But you're going to have to, you can't really tell from this point whether this is copper or not, but you can tell that there's a 3/8 inch pipe thread there. Okay, so when it comes to a vent fan and electrical, that's a big question area too. A lot of times in these older, you know, if there was a 50-year-old bathroom, this vent fan was added at one point, and you don't know whether it's going to have actual venting going outside the roof. So that's kind of a tough one to decipher. You can either get up into the attic and be able to find that out, or be able to see some kind of vent going outside of the house. If you can't find anything, you might as well just plan on having to run a new vent somewhere. So evaluate what that would be, whether you'd be going through a soffit vent or going through a gable end. Those are the two ways I would recommend it. You really don't want to go through a roof unless you're going to have a roofer install the actual roof mounted vent. So, you know, just know that the 50-year-old bathrooms, most likely the vent was added, and you have to, you know, evaluate how that's vented. Now, when it comes to electrical, 50 years ago, they usually didn't even have outlets next to your vanities, and a lot of times, most of the time, so a lot of times they used to have actually medicine cabinets that were light fixtures that used to have plugs that you would be able to plug, you know, have an outlet in there. So when you see a new GFI, it's most likely either connected to the lighting circuit potentially, or doesn't have a new line run to it. So you have to kind of evaluate that. My advice is to take the cover plate off, try to see what kind of wiring it is, and then try to investigate in other areas to see if there's a breaker that actually connects dedicated to this GFI. If it's dedicated, you're in good shape, but if it's not, you know, once you tear out all these walls, this is not going to meet code. Let's just take a look. So yes, looks like we have some new Romex wires, so that's new. It's the 20 amp gauge wire. So what I'll do is evaluate whether this has its own breaker or not, and I'll use a Klein tool to be able to tell that. Okay, so we established that it has new wiring, so let's go check out to see if there's a breaker. So we plug this in, and we'll go see if there's a dedicated breaker to this. Okay, so we'll just take this, run it down the breakers. Oh, there it is. Did you get that? Yeah. Okay, so we're down in the basement. Thankfully, we have a suspended ceiling, so we're able to actually look at the plumbing and evaluate what's here. And if you're a contractor, again, I really highly, you know, I know it takes extra time to do this estimate and take a look at this stuff, but if you want to be accurate on your estimating, you don't want to lose out, be sure you come down into the basement and look at that plumbing. So looking at this, you could see, you can come over now. So looking at this, we have basically copper lines, okay? So that's a good sign. I mean, it's better than if you had galvanized piping, you really want to replace it. We're going to end up replacing all of this anyways, but you know, for the most part, having copper and not having too much excessive green buildup tells me that you can go ahead and actually use this plumbing and be okay. Now you can also evaluate where the toilet comes up. This is a 3-inch stack, and as you can see, this is cast iron. So if you were to change this out, you're going to have to cut this off, somewhere back here, and then refinagle everything. But the cast iron looks like it's in good shape. You don't see any excessive rust. I don't see any water damage really. One of the areas that you'll always see a lot of damage is where the connection point of the copper going into the toilet flange. But in this case, it looks totally fine. So really, looking at this, if you wanted to leave this type of copper in existence, I could see this lasting another 50, 60 years, no problem. But it just depends on whether you're going to be moving any of your plumbing or doing anything, whether it makes sense to actually attach to that. Now, when it comes to water supplies, I see some excessive green corrosion on this copper. So I would probably not want to leave that, because it's probably the copper can start to be very thin in these areas. So I would recommend replacing the copper, or at least this section of it, because this fitting in these areas right here could be a potential leak problem. But we have copper lines, so that's something that could be long lasting as well. But you can see even here, we got some excessive green buildup, and that is not terrible. This is probably not something I'd be overly concerned about, but really PEX is not very inexpensive. It's a very inexpensive way to replace this. So I would go ahead and still replace this if I was, advising the client. But all purposes, this could, since this is easily accessible too, you can easily repair it if it ever needed to be done. Okay. That mud bed is down over there. Okay. All right. So as far as evaluating the floor, okay. So now you see these little 1x material on this side and this side. So what I'm expecting now, looking at this, is that mud bed is actually coming down below the joists. So they most likely notched the top of the joists, and so I'm going to have to reframe the structure for new plywood. So this indicates to me, having these little 1x materials here and the 1x material here means that they had dropped the mud bed area below the floor joist, meaning this is going to be a lot more work as far as replacing the plywood, because you're going to have to sister on new joists in order to get plywood on here. So you can even see, I don't know if you can get in here. You can see a little bit of water damage here, but again, you can see those little 1x materials, and you can see the mud bed actually underneath there. So when you see the basically these planks underneath it here being below the actual joists, that means you are going to have additional framing that you're going to have to do to get new plywood on top of that floor. And I actually miscalculated that. That's not a big whatever. So maybe this shot looks good too. Can you see that very well? Yep. So you can see this is the 1x material. These little planks are recessed below the actual floor joist, and then you can see even the little mud bed right there with metal lath that's in between there. So all that's going to have to be torn out to put a new subfloor down. Okay, so this is the tub. You can see that they attached new plumbing, so this was a repair at some point, and they probably put a new trap because the tub was probably draining slowly. So it all looks like in good shape, but since we're going to be doing a new shower, we're going to be replacing this and then putting in a new 2-inch drain for the shower. But you can also see these are the lines for the tub area. You can see that that's all copper. So we'll convert that to PEX and run all new PEX lines in here as well. So I hope this demonstration has helped you out as far as evaluating your own bathroom remodel. For more help, definitely check out my course. This is a really comprehensive guide that goes step by step all the way through the process of remodeling this bathroom. You'll get into a lot of plumbing, electrical, framing, and we'll get into drywall and tiling, of course. All these things
are really helpful to be able to prepare for your own bathroom remodel if you want to get things done efficiently. So definitely check it out. You'll be able to see the curriculum and just see how many different steps I have guided through all of this. So if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Be able to more than happy to help you out through there. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.